Welcome to the Low Carb Athlete Podcast, where we focus on discussing topics to help you burn fat, optimize health, and improve performance in life and sports. Transform the whole you from the inside out with the holistic method. Let's dive in. Here's your host, Debbie Potts.
Hey there, it's Debbie Potts, the host of the Low Carb Athlete Podcast, and I just wanted to record a little intro for our guest today. He's from the DNA company. You may have seen it advertised a lot on your social media. I know Dave Asprey's behind it and joining in, so I keep seeing the service to check your DNA. And why is this different? You know, I've talked to DNA Fit, did their course for coaches. There's a bunch of other DNA companies, but this is a little different. The information you gather is a little different. It's called the DNA 360 test. And the DNA 360 test takes your saliva sample, as other DNA Fit tests do, and it scans it using 220 trillion data points. Once the scan is complete, then you get a 38-page comprehensive health report based on your DNA. Now, each report is unique to you, as you are an individual, and your genetics are different, while other generic low-quality DNA tests might just tell you your risks, likelihood of getting a disease, or likelihood of this or that. The DNA 360 report's different. It's going to tell you a report that's more personalized health recommendations for you to help you take action to reduce these risks. So it will tell you which foods, which supplements, workouts, environment, and lifestyle are best for you based on your DNA. Now, they just had a special. It was $349, and this was the Father's Day special, but everyone always has specials. So wait for their special. It's $399, but we get actually a discount code for our followers on the podcast. So I will put the link in the show notes. Often I get the Low Carb Athlete, but I think I'll put it in the show notes just in case we don't see it at the end of the show. But the sample reports, you can look up what you get, is on the DNAcompany.com. And as we always say as FDN practitioners, test and not guess. And we want to live our best life, or at least I do. I want to thrive every day, not survive the day, and really work on living the second half of my life, as I just turned 50, that I'm trying to do the best that I can be to improve my future self. So what we're really doing, as I tell my clients, that we're training for our future self. We're not just training for a race this season or next year, but I hope you're working on longevity. So to me, that means I'm training for who I want to be. How do I visualize myself when I'm 70, 89 years old? And I just lost my dad last week. He didn't do, as I say, I'm the oddball in my family. I'm actually more into health and fitness, obviously, and nutrition my whole life. And, you know, they never really exercised. And my dad listened to my podcast and supported me and loved that electronics and computer stuff and podcasting. He thought was always cool. And he just wasn't interested ever in really being active and exercising and making the best health food choices and drinking alcohol at night every night. You know, it adds internal stresses, external stressors accumulate. Granted, he had heart disease 12 years ago, and, you know, it's always not treating things with a Band-Aid. In functional medicine, we look at the why. Why did that happen? Why did you have a heart attack? Why did you get heart disease? What was going on in your body? And it's never just one thing. We call it metabolic chaos, and treating the whole body as a whole rather than separate. That's what functional medicine does, more of a holistic method, as I say, but looking at how all the organs work together, all the body functions together. We're built on cells, and cells into tissues, tissues into organs, organs into a body, a human body. And treating everything individually with a Band-Aid as a medication, prescription drug, doesn't really solve why is it happening. So, for example, my father had, as So they said heart disease, but then a couple of years ago, he got a type of lymphoma, and they gave him chemo drugs. And then the chemo drugs that they gave him to treat his type of lymphoma was causing stress on his kidneys. So then they were treating his kidneys. And at the same time, they're treating his heart disease still. And so there's just all these medications that, it just really empowers me. I won't get into it, but it just empowers me to do what I'm doing on this podcast, do what I'm doing with my coaching, health coaching services to help people live their best life as their future self, and looking at self-care now. Self-care is self-love, loving yourself enough that you invest in your health, doing functional lab testing to reveal hidden internal stressors that are impacting your hormones, immune system, detoxification, digestion, energy systems, your nervous system. So not just taking an antidepressant, not just taking something for your inflammation in your joints, just figure out why is this happening, and let's work on you as a whole person, work north to south, and work on your nutrition, exercise, and lifestyle habits. And then sometimes we still need a medication and we still need traditional doctors, but we want to work together and not just take a pill for this, a pill for an ill, and just do that Band-Aid approach that it causes so much stress in your body, and your body can only tolerate so many stresses. Your liver gets so overwhelmed with all these medications, prescription drugs, and our environmental toxins, and glyphosate, and products we put on our skin, and the food we eat, the vegetable oils, the refined sugars, and everything just accumulates. Your body doesn't know your stressor from poor food quality versus financial stress versus an infection. It just all comes into the same funnel. So I won't go down that rabbit hole, but you might hear me more passionate about you taking action and, really investing in your health to learn, are you doing what you can do, everything you can do now to improve your future self? So when you're 80 years old, do you want to be thriving every day, playing pickleball for hours, taking trips every year, really enjoying life? Or do you want to be struggling and having poor posture and body mechanics and gut inflammation and hormone imbalance and digestion issues and heart, kidney, liver, cancer, whatever it might be? Let's work on what we're doing now. So you might be training for a race, but let's train on the race of life, your future self. So going back to our focus today is the DNA company. I want to know what I can do to prevent having heart disease, a cancer, a kidney infection, and having to be on kidney dialysis and have all that happen. What can I do now? So the DNA company doesn't, of course, promise you're not going to have any of that, but we can take ownership for health and learn some different things we can do to course correct. So we can discover the foods that are right for us based on our DNA. But when I'm working with clients individually, I'm also going to look at their metabolic type, look at their glucose monitors, NutriSense, their levels, and see how food reacts with you. Do a food zoomer as Vibrant Wellness and really look at how you feel after you eat. And then we can discover which supplements are right for you based on your DNA, but also I'll correlate that data with your functional lab testing. What are those hidden internal sources of stress? Discover which our environment is right for you based on your DNA. Discover what lifestyle is right for you and which workouts are best based on your DNA and what risks do you have. And so then you can figure out the best lifestyle, exercise, and nutrition program for you based on your DNA, but also ideally I'd like you to work on the functional lab tests. As I run for clients, they have to pay the labs and I order the labs for them, or they pay the labs and send the labs in themselves, but Dutch test. Look at your hormones over 24 hours. It's a urine test. It's easy to do. It's 5 different tests over a 24-hour period, but your doctor might just be doing, will just be doing a limited hormone panel, and it's going to be blood tests. That's just, say you go to the doctor at 9 a.m., that's what your hormones look at 9 a.m. We're not looking at the whole rhythm throughout the day, what your hormones look like. And then what's going on with your microbiome. What hidden stressors are in your gut? How is your immune system? How's your digestive enzymes? How's your stomach acidity? Are you able to break down the protein? Are you having excess gut bacteria, dysbiosis? Do we have an imbalance? Do we have a parasite, pathogen, fungal, yeast? There's so much to look at, and we don't know a lot of this is even going on unless we test. Do we have mold toxicity? There's high levels of endotoxins, LPS. So there's a lot of this stuff we need to identify to figure out the personalized exercise program. So the DNA company will help look at the genetic side, but working with a practitioner, as myself or somebody else, that will collect more clues as we investigate what is the best program for you based on all this data we can collect, biometrics, look at your exercise program, look at what you're eating now, how you feel, and how's your sleep, how's your stress management, how's your movement throughout the day. I call it the holistic method, the 8 elements of the holistic method that we'll coach you on. I will. And so the DNA company is a great information to add to that investigation as we collect more clues to put those missing pieces of the puzzle together. Or maybe you're just curious, are you fit and healthy from the inside out? Because most athletes are not. Look around. You might be at a race. A lot of athletes are overweight. They're exercising, but they're not doing the right nutrition program for their body. They're not doing the lifestyle habits, the sleep hacks. They're not prioritizing the way they start the day and end the day, that morning ritual and evening ritual. So there's so much more to being a fit and healthy athlete. So I am rambling, but obviously I'm very passionate about you guys taking action of your health and really getting a personalized program. So we're going to talk to Kashif Khan. He's a CEO and the founder of the DNA company, where personalized medicine is being pioneered through unique insights of the human genome. He grew up in Vancouver, Canada, where actually I was growing up as a child till I was 13 years old, then moved to Seattle. So I'm still from Vancouver, Canada in my heart. But Kashif he was just always developing different programs early on. And before he started the DNA company, he was offering consultation for other high growth startups. So he's been in this industry for a while. He got into functional genomics as a CEO of a DNA company and really looking at his own neural wiring and actually the genetically designed to be an entrepreneur that he found out with his own investigation. So you kind of can find what your genetics skill set and what your career might be interesting. So now he sees life through a different lens, his health, as he dove further and investigated his own genetic pathways and family challenges and areas of opportunities to reverse chronic disease. So his measure of success is not in dollars earned, but in lives improved. So I really love that. And I always ask everyone what's their why, and we'll talk about it in the show, but he healed himself by discovering his own genome, working on his own human instruction manual, and understanding how his body actually works, because we're all different. And his goal is to bring this knowledge to the world. So we'll talk about how he got involved in the genomic space, what is genetics through versus functional genomics, and how important are epigenetics. So here's our discount code. If you go to the website, thednacompany.com, add at the end, small caps, TICA, or not L, it's the low carb athlete. So TLCA for $50 off. Sorry, I've not been sleeping. I'm a little bit off. So enjoy the show. Let me know if you have questions. If you want to investigate if you are truly doing all the right things for your unique body and lifestyle and stressors, let me know. I do offer a new client special for our podcast listeners. It involves investigating with nutritional therapy assessment, and it's 2 45-minute coaching sessions to go over a review of the assessment and some recommendations. That's a great way to get started. And then I do offer more one-on-one 3 to 6 months or longer VIP program that we work on all these areas of the holistic method. So I'm here to help you. I will put all the links in the show notes, but please, take your health seriously. Just because you work out every day doesn't mean you're really healthy, because as you might know my story, I was doing all the right thing years ago. Endurance training, Pilates, strength training, yoga, HIIT training. I was doing all that on top of, training for Ironmans for a long time. And I had been doing low carb, doing bulletproof coffee for hours in the morning, not eating enough and not prioritizing protein, as we now know is so essential for our aging athletes. And I was constantly stressed. I was working at 4:30, 5 in the morning until 7:30 at night, and just burning the candle at both ends. So you don't have to be exercising all day to get adrenal exhaustion. It's just chronic stress accumulates through that stress beaker, we say. And really, we want to think of it as a bank account that we put more deposits in versus withdrawals and really take care of ourselves from the inside out. So I'm here to help you. All right. We're talking about genetics today with Kashif of the DNA company. Thanks for coming on the show to talk about science and genetics and epigenetics and how we can improve our fat loss, performance, and longevity for the low carb athlete.
It's a pleasure. And what just sounded really boring, we're going to make really fun. I promise.
Well, I've been so fascinated about this information for a long time. And I just love to personalize nutrition program as a health coach. And I call my coaching method the holistic method, where I coach people on nutrition and exercise.
Right.
But we really have to work on the stress and the sleep and the movement throughout the day, digestion and gut health, hydration with the right electrolyte minerals, and happiness. And all those things are just so important to really thrive every day instead of survive. Because I know a lot of athletes just focus on the exercise part. Right. And then I just got off, as I just told you, the low carb conference on cruise ship last week. And really eye opener of how the regular people eat in our world, in our country on a cruise ship, but how many people just focus on the nutrition part, trying to go keto, low carb. So I really want to dive into the history behind it, your drive, and then let's talk about what we can learn from this to help fat loss, performance, longevity. So
Sure.
Kind of how do you get into this yourself?
So for me, it was longevity. Actually, there was also some fat loss, weight optimization, but that was a byproduct of getting healthy.
Yeah.
I mean, if everyone were to do the things that you said, they would feel entirely different. And people don't appreciate how much stress our cells are under. And I also didn't know until I got sick, which was really the impetus of what we're doing. I don't come from this space. I actually ran a marketing company in Toronto, where I live, where we help startup companies grow. And we were doing a really good job of it. And then I had eczema, I had psoriasis, which was okay. You could still get by. Then I started getting crazy migraines for which my business partner would have to drive me home. I couldn't function. Then I got gut issues where I couldn't eat. Just random days were just horrible. I didn't understand why the same thing that I ate a week ago, all of a sudden today was a disaster. And then depression and mental health issues. And it was all compounding on itself. And just like the story you hear all the time, I was going to 10 different doctors for 10 different things, taking 10 different pills and taking 10 different scans.
Yep.
All of them siloed and bucketed, trying to be resolved. But the question that I kept asking, because I had never been sick before that time. And I kept asking, why is this happening? And why now? Nobody even wanted, forget about answering the question. Nobody even wanted to entertain that I asked it. Like, that's not what we do here, right? So that was my first medical experience, and where I found that medicine was broken. We do a really good job of, I broke my arm while doing squats, actually, because my spotter wasn't spotting me because somebody in yoga pants walked by and he couldn't pay attention. And so I literally broke my arm. And that was great.
Do they feel guilty? That person should feel a little guilty.
He hasn't admitted it to this day. He hasn't admitted it. There's a mirror. I saw what happened. So anyways, that was amazing. Go to the hospital, acute care, take care of it. But that same toolkit is used for chronic disease and aging, which is, let's just react to a problem. So long story short, it was through my genome that I started to discover that not what version of what gene or what variant, what mutation, I literally was missing some key genes. Forget about, again, a variant. I literally didn't. If your genes are a human instruction manual, I had a page torn out. Completely gone. And so I wasn't doing this function. A gene is an instruction. It tells your body and your cells what to do. I wasn't getting that instruction. So my body didn't function, which led to this deep cellular inflammation. which led to all these inflammatory responses like eczema, psoriasis, autoimmune psoriasis, eczema, more inflammation, which then led to it being, and why did it express in these various things? Because I was already suboptimal or not wired right in those areas. I just needed that trigger to push me over the edge. And a bunch of stuff started firing at the same time. So when I healed the central hub of my bad genes, what wasn't functioning right, and we can get into details there, all these spokes went away. You know, it's been 5-6 years. I haven't had eczema, psoriasis, migraines, gut issues. I don't have sort of mood issues anymore. I'm at my optimal. I'm in the best shape I've ever been, all because I supported what needed supporting genetically and removed what I wasn't designed for that I was doing wrong. So kind of balancing these two things, and here you go. I'm healthy.
Yeah. That's what I met you at the PaleoFX conference with the FDN practitioner booth across the way. And that's exactly kind of what happened to me. I wrote a book, Life's Not a Race, It Is a Journey, explaining the same thing. It was like, I saw 8-9 different doctors trying to get help, and it was chronic stress that accumulated from various sources, but how it can create those metabolic chaos, we say, as in FDN, that just random things like dysbiosis, the skin issues, food sensitivities, like all this whole domino effect of stuff that happens. But how do you don't just fix one thing, it's multiple things. But you found that just, looking at the genetics can really come into play of what is off balance, what's missing. Like I wondered why do I react to stress differently? And then other people could do Ironmans after Ironmans every year. And I couldn't run my own business and do Ironmans. And I had all these health problems because of my stress. Like, why am I so different than others? But that's why I became so interested personally into looking at my genetic profile. It's like, why me? Why did this happen to me, not other people? So that's a great story. I think we all share similar. Start.
That the stress part, and there's two stress. There's like what you feel here and what load are you putting on your body, right? You mentioned both of them. So like you said, we're different. Do you want to go through trial and error and break yourself 6 times until you figure it out?
Yeah.
Or do you want to read your instruction manual and know exactly what you're wired to do?
Yeah, right? That's so true. Instruction manual, your N=1 instruction manual for your body, you should be. You're born with it. It's like, well, what are my instructions how to live my life my best?
Exactly. So when it comes to stress, there's some people for whom, let's look at the physical part first. Like you talked about the Ironman. So there's some people, and we do this work with professional athletes because we're in Toronto. It's sort of the mecca of NHL training. So we deal with a lot of NHL players. And a lot of them have this complaint. I train the same, but why does that guy go back to the gym the next day and I need a break like 2 or 3 days? I can't keep up.
Yep.
Because your ability to recover genetically is not the same, right? Or maybe you don't deal with oxidative stress well. When your cells take in oxygen and nutrition to create energy, right? In that process, you create oxidants, which are toxic. They're free radicals. You have a gene called SOD2, which determines how well you clear that stuff, that smoke in the chimney, right, and get rid of it. Some people don't do that well. So when your trainer says, okay, you're done with your weight training, I'll get on the treadmill for half an hour. That may be the thing that's slowly killing you, literally. Because if you're not dealing with the oxidative stress, well, then these free radicals are in your blood, causing inflammation. Everything we've talked about so far is all about inflammation. And whether you talk to an MD, whether you talk to a chiropractor or a personal trainer, everyone agrees that disease is rooted in inflammation. What is the inflammation rooted in? That's where we need to get a little more personal, right? So for some people, it's this, so that I don't recover from cardiovascular activity. For some people, it's that when it comes to weight training and I want to be a linebacker, I want to be big and heavy. Are your hormones designed for that? Are your hormones telling your body to develop that type of body type? So when you're lifting 400 pounds, are you just going to end up tearing tendons and ripping muscle that doesn't ever get repaired, right? Or are you more estrogen dominant, which people don't think of, that the estrogen is actually what triggers the power and the size, right? Men actually need estrogen to get big. And that belief of, I can't tell you how many hockey players we've dealt with that were given a testosterone gel pack that they put on their skin where the skin absorbs the testosterone and they end up growing man boobs, right? Because the thinking is you don't have enough testosterone, let me give you more. Well, genetically, what if you convert the testosterone into estrogen, which some men do?
Yeah. I see that a lot when I do Dutch tests with my male clients. So many people are not clearing that excess estrogen.
Yeah.
Men.
Producing too much, not clearing enough. You need to get personal about what that cascade looks like before you start doling out solutions. Now, the other part of stress you talked about up here, right?
Yes.
Perception. What we did in our research and when we realized what was missing is that geneticists don't study people, they study genes. So they sit in a lab, petri dish, AI data, and they try and figure out what does each gene mean. That's why it doesn't really translate clinically, because the human says, well, that's not the way I function, right? My body isn't a bunch of independent genes doing separate things all at once. It's systems and pathways. We already know how the cardiovascular system works and how the hormone system works. Let's get the genes speaking to that system. So neurochemicals of the brain, it's the same thing. There's no addiction gene. There's no, depression gene. There's neurochemicals that have a pathway or system. How much of the chemical do I produce? How well do I bind it to experience that thing? And how quickly do I get rid of it? Even if you just look at those three things, you can be very specific all of a sudden about how somebody feels. And if you look at stress, well, look at me. I have the lowest ability to bind dopamine. Dopamine is the pleasure that allows you to feel pleasure and reward. My sensors are very sparse, my receptors are very sparse, genetically determinable. We can know that from your genes. So when it comes to pleasure and reward, I don't really feel it. The enzymes, the genes that instruct the breaking down of the dopamine to bring you back to normal, I have the fastest version of that. And then COMT, which comes along to sweep up that sort of metabolite that's been broken down, I have the fastest version of that. So I'm feeling it way down here, and it lasts like a millisecond. So before the thing's even over, it's already gone. So for me, stress is experienced very differently than the person who has the maximum dopamine expression and the very slow clearance, who's constantly feeling satisfied and happy. For me, I'm teetering constantly the bad, right? I'm one step away from depression all the time. So for me, bad news isn't that bad because I don't feel that great anyway. That's why I'm seeking reward. So when it comes to stress, I'm more high functioning. I'm pursuing it. I'm chasing it, right? So stress is actually good for me because if I don't have the stress and something to chase, I'm going to fall into depression. Whereas this person who has the high level of dopamine, when you take it away from them, when you say you can't see your family, you can't go to the gym, whatever, they have the delta value for them, it's a crash. So it's an acute stress response. And for them, it's debilitating. I can't go to work. I can't go back to the gym. This was too much because they're not used to this lack of pleasure and lack of reward. They're always up here. So if you don't, even just that one thing, if you look at, you understand stress so personalized and so differently, but there's many things we can talk about that personalize even this one thing, stress.
Yeah. That's so interesting. It's a great analogy because it is not just one genetic SNP. It's a combination. And if you look at how the genetics work and methylation cycles, and it's confusing. It's overwhelming. There's so many different factors into play and cofactors and enzymes, as well as the SNPs and all of that, and nutrient deficiencies. But what can we do to figure out what our optimal self should be, like how we should strive nutritionally and exercise and stress and all that? How does your genetic program work compared to others?
Well, I think the first thing is that people think too micro. Like the belief is that I should download an app and it should tell me don't eat chickpeas, add some kale, no ranch dressing, right? That's too micro. What you need is the macro information, meaning how well do you metabolize fats? There's a gene for that. Should you be on a keto diet or not? If I tell you should be on a keto diet, the rest you can handle, right? How well do you metabolize starches? How good is your insulin response and insulin resistance? Is being on a starch diet going to lead to diabetes? Or do you actually metabolize starches really well, in which case you should probably eat more carbs because it powers strength and size, right? It's a very easy fuel to burn. How well do you produce the enzymes that help you break down the main vegan protein sources, beans, lentil, legumes? Before you go choose to be a vegan, are you going to be able to get the protein intake you need with the green peas and the beans and everything that you rely on? What if you don't produce the enzymes that do that, right? When it comes to what you eat, how well do you detoxify at the gut? There's specific genes that instruct what's called glutathionization, this binding of toxins, sending them to the liver to get rid of them. Just like when you drink alcohol, we all know our liver gets rid of it, but how does it do that? Glutathione is deployed to signal, let's capture this toxin and send it to the liver. Let's get rid of it. Some people don't do that in their gut, or at least they don't do it well. Some people don't do it at all.
Yeah.
Now, all of a sudden, they have to be careful when they're eating bread, even though they don't have a problem with carbs. They may have a problem with the chemicals used to dry the wheat. They may have a problem with the chemicals in the packaging. They may have a problem with, I bought a bag of organic quinoa chia seed cookies, but guess what? It was in a bag, which means it went through equipment, which is heavy metal, which they spray with chemicals every day to clean.
Yeah.
Right.
You don't even think of that.
You don't even think of any of that stuff. They're not ingredients. They're not required. There's no requirement to disclose. It's not in your food, but it is in your food. So that's why you have this variability between people saying, nah, it's not a big deal. I do that all the time. You're just, well, for me, it's a disaster. Well, because you're not the same.
Yeah.
Right?
I know. So a good example, I was on this cruise last week with low carb conference. We're at sea. We're in a conference session. But anyways, I was on trying to eat.
Yeah.
I am so sensitive to so many things. The first day I thought, okay, I'll kind of break my fast with breakfast. And I got scrambled eggs. But then I had a grass fed, was not grass fed. I had a burger patty. And anyways, one of those things I had my very first day, I was so sick for 2 days and everyone else can eat it. But here's me totally sick, nauseous feeling, just had to lay down for like the first day and a half because I felt so sick. Cause I don't know if it was the, processed meat, what's in the eggs and just all these things that go into it. But that's exact example. Like there's 5,500 other people here and they can eat that, but I can't.
Yep. And I would argue that you will probably have a slightly better regimen than most on a day-to-day basis.
Probably
right?
a little bit.
Yeah. So the other challenge there is that when you're clean, again, we talk about that delta value. Yeah. When you eat something that's not clean, if you're metabolically unhealthy, you're not used to feeling good.
Yes.
You may not even know it, right? You may not know that the brain fog, joint pain, kind of low energy, it's just who you think you are. You don't even, because you got so used to it. But once you get rid of all that stuff and you start to feel like your optimal self, the way you were when you were in your teens, for example, you really notice, like you did, what happens when you do something wrong.
Yeah, definitely. Especially walking through the casino with smoking. That was like headache right away. And then I sat outside one evening and there's a hot tub behind us. And what could I just only breathe in? The chemicals from the hot tub. That gave me a headache. It's like, oh my God, there's some downfalls of being so clean and in a healthy environment when you get to the real world.
And even then, so there's genes, like just like we talked about the detox of the gut, there's the detox of the lungs. When you're breathing in airborne toxic insults, some people don't really notice. Some people like yourself, by the way, me included, if I smelt that toxic chemical from the hot tub, I would have the same reaction with you. I would actually get eczema. So when we had our construction going on in our building, we were building a lab. One of our business partners has an extra copy of this key detox gene for when you breathe in things that are airborne, like mold, chemicals, pesticides, etc. I have 0 copies. I don't even have the gene. So we had this complete different experience. He's in the room with the guys, like, do this, do that. I walk in, it's like headache, brain fog, right? And that's feel, if you don't understand why, you feel like, is there something wrong with me? Like, no, there's something right with you. Your ancestors lived clean. And so you're not designed for all of this nonsense that's going on.
It's because we're Canadian, right? We're up in the Great White North.
Yeah, no kidding.
So I want to kind of get into your question you put in here, genetics versus functional genomics and how important are epigenetics. So if we can touch on that, and then I want to go into how your program works. Because I know so many people, and I was speaking in the conference, I was a speaker on the holistic method, my 8 elements, how people can improve their health and performance. But looking at genetics, I think is important because everyone is doing keto, carnivore, trying low carb, but how to fine tune it, like you're saying, it's not exact amount. Everyone is so different. But first, kind of what is functional genomics? Is that what we were just talking about?
It is to some degree, but I'll lay it out a little more specifically. So genetics is You go get a test, and this is why genetics doesn't work and why people actually don't want it. You're told, based on your genes, you have an 80% chance of Alzheimer's, right?
Yeah.
What does that do for me? That gives me anxiety for the next 30 years, right? Maybe 40, depending what age you are. And then what? Like, why are you? It's the exact same experience I had at the doctor. Oh, it looks like you have eczema. Why? I've been alive at that point for 36 years. I'm 42 now. Why? What changed? Right? So genetics was sort of the early version of what insights we could glean from our DNA. Propensity, risk, not certainty, which is what we really need, not that probability answer. So certainty looks like this. If I'm telling you that you have an 80% chance of Alzheimer's, I'm also telling you that 20% didn't get it with the exact same genetic profile that's supposed to be so precise. So what's the difference? The difference is their environment, nutrition, and lifestyle habits. Because you're not born with Alzheimer's, you're not born with type 2 diabetes, you're not born with breast cancer and cholesterolemia and all. These all happen later in life because it takes, I'm talking about chronic disease, not rare genetic conditions, but for the most part, chronic diseases happen later in life because it takes you that long of making the wrong choices, misaligned to your genetic capacity to cause the level of inflammation where you get sick. So if you understand, here's my red flags. There's an Alzheimer's risk. There's a cholesterolemia risk. There's a breast cancer risk. Now I need to ask the question, what caused the 80% to get it and the 20% to prevent it? That's the research we did. We studied 7,000 people, one by one, all N of one, like you said, to understand not here's the blanket average, but here's what this person did and this person did and here's why this person got it and this person didn't. And some of the things are obvious, but for the most part, they're completely counterintuitive. For example, the example I gave of oxidative stress. There's many, many people that we tell them the root cause of their cholesterol problem is that they exercise too much. Because they put themselves into intense oxidative stress. Why do you see these soccer players that drop dead at 35 and Olympic sprinters that drop dead at 35? The best health, the best doctors, the best trainers. Yeah. Because the level of oxidative stress they put them, that training that they compressed into this short window of 35 years, which normally someone would experience in 100, caused a severe level of inflammation, which then your body will use cholesterol as a hormone to reduce the inflammation. That's why the cholesterolemia starts. And we can determine what quality of hardware you have with your genes. Do you have high quality arterial walls that don't get inflamed? They're more resilient like stainless steel. Or do you have low quality that if you have the oxidative stress and you have the bad quality hardware, they're going to get inflamed faster because they're not designed for that level of toxin and salt. Your body then again will use this cholesterol hormone to reduce it. It starts to build up, and then all of a sudden you have a disease called cholesterolemia, which started in endothelial inflammation, arterial inflammation. Wow. So genetics is you got an 80% chance of Alzheimer's. Functional genetics is it looks like you fall in the Alzheimer's bucket. Here's the right environment, nutrition, and lifestyle choices for you to prevent it. Right? Here's what the people that didn't get it did versus let's try and figure out what pill to make for you.
Yeah. Right? Well, yeah, I think it's if we watch our parents' age, like my parents turned 80 last year. My mom is doing pretty good. My dad is, heart disease past 10 years, kidney issues, now a type of cancer. And he hurt his back and has all this pain and he can't, is not eating. And it's just amazing to see people deteriorate that you love and you can't do anything because they don't do the nutrition and lifestyle habits. But it's like, okay, what can we do now? As I always say, what can I do now to improve my future self? Like, I don't want to look like my dad 30 years from now. It's like I'm on a mission to do everything I can do now. So at 80, I'm traveling around the world and feeling amazing and having fun.
You were born with this gift of health.
Yeah. There's
no reason why you shouldn't have it until your 90s when you're on a cruise in Aruba and you just happen to forget to fill your oxygen tank and you drown in the ocean. You should not die of chronic disease.
Yeah.
Right? Aging should slow way down. It should be literally like a monkey attack in Belize because you're on holiday, enjoying yourself. It should not be, you got to die with a great story.
Yeah.
It should not be I spent the last 10 years in a hospital bed if it's a chronic condition, because you weren't born with any of those things. You don't have them.
Yep.
You caused them from your choices.
Yeah. And I think that's why I'm passionate about, our audience, athletes, and especially endurance athletes. And I was doing Ironmans and marathons and 50K trail runs. What am I doing now to help my future self, or am I harming my future self? I was doing these races for so long until, if I still was able to do it, I would be racing to today. But since I got myself broken in 2013, it's 9 years ago, that it was a choice. And if I could have learned with my genetics back then how to train differently and give myself more recovery time, or not race as much as I did, on top of a very stressful job, owning in my own business, having a huge rent, just have constant stressors every day in my life. But, what are some things that you can learn from, using programs as your genetic program? Is the DNA company, do you take your genetic SNPs, or how does it work to get our own personalized program?
So what we do is, one of the things we realize is even the genetic products were kind of, call it, broken. Why? They were designed around this belief that you get a genetic report and then some guru has to interpret it for you, a PhD, a genetic consultant, somebody, right? And we said, why? Why does it have to be that difficult? It should be easy. The one of the reasons it doesn't get adopted, your doctor doesn't want to use it because even they can't understand it. And they get to see you for 5 minutes, and it takes them 1 hour prior to that 5 minutes to go through your report and figure out what to tell you. They don't do it, and that's why it doesn't work. So we realized the thing we had to do, our mission was to make it easy to use. So we now have the insights. We had those functional insights: environment, nutrition, lifestyle choices, how to actually help people. Now we have to move away from this, I'm the conduit to information, and without me, you can't understand this, to self-serve. It should be easy to understand. So we built an artificial intelligence platform that takes all of what we've known, all of what we've learned from all these various 7,000 people that we studied, and the reports speak to the problems as opposed to the genes. So there's 6 systems: cardiovascular, mood and behavior, everything about the brain, diet, nutrition, the macros and micros of what you should eat, hormones and fitness. So how is your body designed, hair, skin, body type, fat, muscle, all that stuff. Cellular health. So immunity, detox, methylation, oxidation, all the things that lead to either good or bad cellular health. And then the last one is sleep. I can't fall asleep. I can't stay asleep. I sleep through the night, but I wake up feeling like garbage. Genetically, those are 3 different things, and we've understood them very well. So within these 6, they're all broken up into micro reports, which is, in mood and behavior, for example, we don't tell you got this gene and that gene and that gene. We say anxiety, addiction, burnout, procrastination, ADHD, neuroticism. Why are you a drama queen and, slam doors when you walk out of meetings? We speak in the context that people are actually looking for. Right? The problems you're actually trying to solve. By the way, the genes are also there if you want to geek out and understand the science, but we argue you don't need it. What people need to know is what's wrong and how do I fix it? Mm-hmm. It should be that simple, right? Our job, your job, every coach, every practitioner's job is to make it very easy for the patient, consumer, whoever, to figure out what's wrong and how do I fix it. That's the outcome. And that's what we built. The other thing we put in there, we realized once we figured out the what's wrong and how do I fix it part, so that it's very self-serve and easy, we realized 2 more things: that we need the recommendations in the reports. And genetic testing companies usually don't give you recommendations because they're not in the recommendation business. They're only in the business of telling you what each gene means. They don't meet patients. So we realized in the work we did with these 7,000 people, we understood the habits of the healthy. What supplements did they take for each condition, for each gene profile? What were their environmental habits? What were their lifestyle habits? How did they work out? What was everything they did and didn't do that we need to teach you based on your genome? So that's the second thing we did, is we built this. And in fact, the majority of the report is recommendations, right? The third thing is we understood, now that we've told you what's wrong, given you recommendations, even told you what's right and giving you recommendations for the right, because we don't know if you're doing the right thing right anyway. Now we need to figure out how to actually get you to do it. Because even with all this, We all know, and you know, as coaching people, I can give you the stack of the most valuable information in the world, and a week or two into it's going to get stuffed into a drawer somewhere, and you're going to move on to something else.
Yeah.
Right.
True.
So we hired Dr. BJ Fogg. He runs the Stanford University Behavior Change Lab. So he's a guru when it comes to behavior change. He wrote the book Tiny Habits, New York Times bestseller.
That's funny. Sorry to interrupt, but I help Ben Greenfield, our coaching program, and we've had him speak with us as Keon coaches. And then in our 6-week transformation program, we do have Eliza, this one gal that learned from BJ doing the tiny habits. And I was speaking about that to the conference last week on tiny habits. So it's a huge part for people to figure out, okay, what do I do with all this information, and where do I start? How do I do
Where
something?
do I start? How do I implement it? How do I become that new version of myself?
Yeah, exactly.
That's not a switch that you flip on or off.
No,
right?
no.
So that's what we did, is we got him to build right into the reports all these behavioral change recommendations so that it's easy. And it's so easy that when you read it, it's kind of like, well, I already knew that, but you weren't doing it.
Yeah, exactly. What are you doing about it? Taking action.
Yeah. So something as simple as, well, the BDNF gene, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, helps understand your circadian rhythm, meaning that your relationship with daytime and nighttime. Some people can't fall asleep that well because their BDNF gene is off. So if they're not doing the right things at the right time of day, like starting the day with sunlight so the vitamin D triggers certain things and their body knows the day has begun, as an example, breathing deep at the right times, exercising at the right times, they may not be able to fall asleep on time. So one of the things we tell them is turn your laptop off an hour before bed, because the blue light mimics sunlight and your brain gets confused, especially you, because your circadian rhythm is broken. Your clock is broken. Okay, are they going to do it? Well, the habit may be at this time, set an alarm on your phone, and your laptop gets put in a drawer in your kitchen, right? Because that's not your bedroom and that's not your living room.
Yeah.
Something simple like that, even though it sounds so easy when you hear it, you weren't doing it, right? And this is just how to take all of what you just learned about yourself. My internal clock is broken. My body doesn't know when it's nap time or sleep time. Can't tell the difference. So I need more stuff supporting that, and I need to eliminate everything detracting that. And here's a very simple thing I do. Phone and laptop get shoved in a drawer that's very far from my bedroom.
Yep. Yeah. And I think that's important. I was telling that to the 200 people in our conference last week. It's like, all right, you're in seminar, for example, any conference you go to, retreat, any, self-empowerment sessions, you get all this information. And then the same thing you're saying, you get the notes, put it on your shelf or shove it in your office, and you don't even look at it again. But it's like, all right, it's Transformation Tuesday. Let's, take this information. What's one thing that's your area of opportunity? Pick that. And then, all right, let's break that down into a tiny habit that you can start taking action on today. Right. Like you said, get up in the morning, go outside for a walk without sunglasses on, see the sunrise, see that first sunlight exposure, and start your day that way. Just amazing, simple tricks that you can do and implement into your lifestyle that are free. That's what I was trying to tell in my presentation last week. This doesn't cost anything. It's just a choice that you can make and how you can be the best version of yourself by creating these new tiny habits. So I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah. For sure.
But with the stress and, looking at exercise and nutrition and sleep, as I say in the holistic method coaching way I do, you can take these genetic SNPs. Is there like 3 or 4? Do you have kind of some research standards or how many SNPs you take into account to create that information? Because I know some people have so many they can use first. Yeah,
this is another thing that we think the industry is doing wrong. Most genetic websites you read will tell you how many genes they sequence, right? That's the bragging right. We sequence 700, we sequence 7,000, we sequence 700,000. My question to them is, how many people have you helped?
Yeah, true.
Right? It's great big data, but it's data for the future. It's not data for now. We don't understand enough about most of those genes for them to be actionable. And this is why you get this probability-based outcome. So what we did is we said, what are the genes that actually matter? Right? We know where most disease starts. It's inflammation. So where does that come from? It comes from hormones. It comes from sleep. It comes from glutathione. It comes from methylation. It comes from oxidation. It comes from eating the wrong foods. right?
Yeah.
And then we need to understand literature, all that stuff. So we sequence a lot less, but do a lot more with each gene. And what I mean there is we don't give you a list of genes. Our algorithm populates a pathway and system that mirrors the human body and how it actually works. And one gene doesn't want to do one thing. The COMT gene, for example, a typical genetic test will say you have this version of COMT, which means this. Well, COMT is implicit in your brain. It's also implicit in hormones. It also is part of methylation. Mm-hmm. Like it does multiple different things. It's also part of estrogen toxicity clearance. So it's not one gene in its meaning. It's what is the pathway, and then what genes are in the pathway. One gene might show up in 10 different places.
Yes.
So that's one thing. Second thing is we test for more, which means that SNP that you were talking about, which is a spelling mistake in a gene is thousands of letters long, and sometimes there's one gene that's off, or one letter, sorry, and then that gene doesn't function the right way. There's also something called an insertion or deletion, which means a whole paragraph is missing. And genetic testing companies typically don't test for that because they're giving you a list of SNPs because it's a big data dump, right? There's also something called a copy number variation where forget about a spelling mistake, forget about a paragraph missing. You don't even have the gene missing. Or you have an extra copy of it. Like me and my partner, Bryce, our business partner, I was missing a key detox gene. He had an extra copy of it. So the same environmental exposure to us, two very different outcomes, right? When we were doing the construction. So we test for those three different types of variants. And I would argue that most test for only the SNPs. I haven't really seen many people that test for the other two. And then we interpret it in terms of the pathways and systems, the way the body actually works. And then after all that's said and done, we don't talk about anything unless we also know what recommendations to make. Right? So it goes far beyond a genetic report. It's literally a human instruction manual. Here's your human instruction manual. Here's what you need. Here's what you need, right? Not here's what people need. And we just find it's so much more actionable. Fibromyalgia to breast cancer to, autism, we're just constantly every day helping people.
Yeah, I find that so interesting. And I love to use that as an additional tool when I'm doing coaching with my clients, because as a nutritional therapy practitioner, I will do a 3-day food log or longer, ideally with their signs and symptoms, right. Their poop and their exercise and their mood and their energy after they eat and the timing, but then also look at, we have a nutritional therapy assessment questionnaire of 310 questions or 309 of signs and symptoms and rating those. And then to take the genetics with that and look at their exercise program, their lifestyle habit, and really put that all together is so fun to me. And that's what I have been focusing on doing for clients. Like, let's just do a test and assess. What are you doing now to be the best version of yourself? What are you doing now to improve your future self? And let's figure out what you can do. What are your areas of opportunity? And let's adjust that. So we have a personalized program for you to perform, look your best, feel your best, all that stuff. But I think it's a great way to get started, to additional tools to enhance that aging process.
Yeah, what you just said it just nailed it, which is, I want to get better. Where do I start?
Yeah.
Right.
And that's a choice though, but that's a choice. So most people, as I noticed last week, don't really love them. I would say self-care is self-love. Do you love yourself enough to make these small, tiny choices, these habits? It's like, why do so many people struggle with prioritizing their health and putting that oxygen mask on first and doing these simple things to be able to thrive when you're 89 years old? Or as Dave Asprey says, like 100 and what does he want to do? 140 or something.
182.
Yeah.
Very specific number.
So tell us kind of how to get started. Where do we send people to learn more? And do they upload their raw data into your program, or how does it work?
So because a lot of the other testing companies don't test for what we test for, raw data typically doesn't work.
Yeah.
Meaning, so we've tried. It's just, we can give you like 70% of what we're saying, but even then a lot of it is assumptions, right? So, and
if you assume, that means an ass out of you, right?
Yeah. And me.
Yeah.
So, so we don't do that anymore. We realize that we know what we're doing is the right way to do it. So we just stop taking raw data. Instead, there's a need to get tested again. So the product is called the DNA 360 report. It's on our website. In fact, we can even, for the sake of your audience and respecting their time and joining us today, we can offer some kind of promo. I can get that set up.
So yeah, I think we did a $50 off on your intake form here, the low carb athlete as a code.
Oh, cool. So we already did that.
The DNA. So they go to thednacompany.com / I can't see TLCA. I think you wrote. So we'll find a code. Oh yeah. The low carb athlete. That's what it is.
Low carb athlete,
yeah. TLCA. So our code would be TLCA.
Yeah.
So I'll put that in the show notes.
/
Oh yeah. / Sorry.
Yeah, / yeah.
I never say that out loud. You read it.
Yeah. The DNAcompany.com / TLCA, right?
Yes.
TLCA, and there'll be a discount at checkout. You won't see it when you're shopping, but at the checkout, it will give you a promo discount.
So how long does it take if I go today, because I want to do this for myself, and then I'll do kind of a follow-up on this podcast,
Sure.
part 2 to my own results and how I can use them. Yep. So how long is the process once I get that, order it online, and then, you probably have to ship a testing kit, kind of walk us through it.
Yeah. As of today, suppose you're going right now and getting the kit. It first gets shipped to you, right? And then you produce a saliva sample. You just spit in a tube. It's very simple. It lasts like 6 months. You don't need to worry about shipping it off right away. But from the day that we get it back, it's 4 to 6 weeks of processing. We also, by the way, launched a new lab, which is now up and running, which is going to bring that down to 3 weeks. So I'm not sure when this will air, but by the time it may be the new lab. If not, it's 4 to 6 weeks. The industry standard is 6 weeks. That's what typically it takes normally for DNA testing. And then what you're going to get is, so along the way, you'll get updates anyway of what's happening. But once you get your results, you get access to a portal where it's all digital. We did this on purpose because this is another thing that we thought was wrong with genetics is emailing you a bunch of reports. It's first of all static, meaning that if I learn something new in 6 months, I got to send you another report, versus every time you log back into your portal, there's new updates and new things, and you can keep learning and keep learning and keep learning for this one, because your genes don't change. Science changes and evolves, and we learn more, but your DNA is the same. So once we have it, we can keep helping you and supporting you. So the portal does 3 things. The reports are actually in the form of what we call a gene cast. It's a personalized podcast. And the reason why we did this is we, again, by learning from what people actually want and need, they're like, hey, I got my reports. Now who's going to tell me something? I want to talk to somebody. So we said, we already know all the possible outcomes. Our artificial intelligence will curate for you a personalized podcast, which we call a gene cast. You sit and listen to these audio files as if you're listening to a PhD going through your DNA, explaining, here's what you have, here's what this gene does, here's what this means for you, you behave like this, you eat like this, et cetera, et cetera. Then there's actual, written reports, which are more about the recommendations. Let's dive into the problem. How does it break up into anxiety, addiction, all the other stuff. And then in there, you've got recommendations. If there are recommendations, some don't have, but for the most part, they do. And the last thing is there's a ton of video to help you understand the context. Meaning when we talk about mood and behavior, you have to first understand how we believe the brain actually works. Right? When we talk about cardiovascular disease, you have to understand how that actually works. We don't think of cardiovascular disease as a heart disease. We think of it as an artery disease. The heart is the very last problem, right? After the arteries are calcified, blocked up, cholesterol buildup, then eventually the heart doesn't get enough blood and it suffers. But the disease is a disease of the arteries. So we think a little bit differently. And that's why we have these videos to show you how we think about all these conditions, which helps you get more value out of the reports too.
So if you are a coach or practitioner, is there a training program for those people if they want to learn more how to apply this to their own clients?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. The other thing that we understood is that when it comes to coaches, practitioners, the reports that I just described are too much, meaning you don't have time for all that. You're not going to go through tons and tons and tons and tons of content to figure out the red flag. The consumer, on the other hand, is like, hey, I just paid for this. Give me everything. Right? I may not use it all, but give me everything. When I have time, I'll sit and learn, and I might spend the next few weeks diving through all this stuff. So what we did was we built a separate set of reports for health coaches and practitioners, which is a summary. And the whole purpose is twofold. We go straight to the red flags. We don't bother telling you what's going right. You don't, it's already right. We go straight to the red flags and tell you, here's where you need to focus. And we give you recommendations, and we give you more recommendations than what we are able to give the consumer, because some of them are clinical in nature, which we cannot directly tell a consumer. And it allows you to walk into the room and sound like an expert with zero training. And that's another thing that we thought was broken, is that you cannot incorporate genetics into practice without all this crazy training, which you don't have time for. We didn't believe that we said, why don't we build the tool so it speaks your language and doesn't require training? So we did that. That being said, there is training for people that want to dive deeper. There's a free training, which just helps you think the way we think. And then there's a paid training, which dives a little deeper into functional genomics. And they're on our Academy website. So academy.thednacompany.com.
Great. Cool. Yeah. I look forward to learning more. I love this stuff. And I'll use myself as a guinea pig first to get started. So I can learn my results. So I look forward to it, because I've done different programs, but this sounds definitely unique and different approach that I appreciate, because we have so much information we get from the genetic test, but how to apply it to your own individual self and see your own areas of opportunities based on your red flags and imbalances, just functions to make them function at optimal level, homeostasis. Great.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for all your information today. And we'll put any links in the discount code in our show notes and more info as we come up. And maybe I'll add second addition to this podcast with my own results. So stay tuned and make sure you're watching the YouTube channel, the Low Carb Athlete on there, as well as the podcast version. So thank you, Kashif.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Low Carb Athlete Podcast. If you have any questions, feedback, or topic suggestions, let us know on Facebook or at debbiepotts.net. You can help us to continue to grow by leaving a review on iTunes. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.